afternoon session where we will have discussions on building new business models, what is the future of work, and how to build product organization. We hope that you'll be able to explore we hope that you were able to explore the networking zone and that you met up with your peers. I'd like to encourage you to take a few minutes to fill in your feedback forms pinned on the chat window and in the lobby. And it goes without saying, your opinion is very important to us, so please help us get better. Without any further delay, let me introduce our first session for the afternoon, a leaders' discussion on decoding the talent saga and creating experiences for the new work models. Our speakers for the session are Jackie Crockford, Vice President, Global Business Services, AstraZeneca. Jackie joined AstraZeneca in the month of August 2019 as the Vice President for Global Business Services, where she is accountable for delivering internal shared services across the globe and across all functions of our company. Jackie is a member of AstraZeneca's Inclusion and Diversity Council, where she leads the work in this area across the finance function. She plays an active role in driving an inclusive organization for all. We also have with us this afternoon Anil Yadav, Senior Vice President and Head of Global Business Services, Philips. Anil brings over 20 years of work experience in building and leading global business services and in-house centers in India for global organizations. His knowledge and understanding of the GBS organization growth trajectory is spread across a wide spectrum of businesses and functional areas. We also have with us Anne Florell, Vice President and HR Head, Target India. Anne is an important member of Target's leadership and is entrusted with maintaining the happiness of employees, whether it be through perks, recognitions, and awards, or compensation. Chairing this session is Indraneel Banerjee, or Indy as he is fondly known. He's a partner at McKinsey and Company Inc. Indy is an expert in next-generation operating models. He specializes in designing, negotiating, transitioning, and operationalizing global services programs and has led over 86 global programs for Fortune 250 companies across 28 countries. We're glad to have you all with us, and we're tremendously excited to hear from you. So without further ado, over to you, Indy.
Thank you, Justin. Welcome to a very esteemed panel that we've got on a topic that's very, very exciting, which is the talent paradigm for the new age that we find ourselves in. What we tend to see is a bunch of themes that cluster around the new age of talent. Anchoring it is what do we see on experience and belongingness, which is what keeps our employees engaged and happy where they are. The whole piece around well-being and the kind of flex that people are looking at. And then for the era of the future, what kind of skill sets are we looking at? What kind of flexibility do we want? How do we build that up? How do we get the talent for the future? These are some of the themes that we're going to explore across the next half hour. So without much ado, let me just lead in, and let me lead in first with you, Anil. I think one of the provocations that we tend to see is that employee experience through COVID and in the future hybrid world is actually very widely varying. Our latest research on GCC for 2022 actually says that the variation in employee experience between the top performing and the bottom performing GCCs is not 5, 10, 15%, it is 6x times. And it's directly correlated to the likelihood to stay in the company. At the same time, belongingness and culture, working remote has actually dropped. Would love to hear about your experience about how do you think about that, and what are you doing with building in employee experience at your company?
Hey, thanks, Indy, for asking this question, because I think this is one of the, if I may call it, one of the biggest worries which we have, because earlier, before COVID, the experience was more about introducing you to the company. And most of the time you introduce your company when you bring somebody to the company floors, right? It could be a shared services or, or headquarters or your plant, depending upon what kind of company you are. And then people start associating themselves with the brand and what we do and feel a lot of pride. And that is how the association starts building up. But, for example, in the last 2.5, 3 years, we have onboarded, 2,000-3,000 people plus in our shared services across the world, and they never experienced coming to any of our offices, right? So, how do you start saying you're proud working for this company or that company? And that has been a real challenge. I think we all have been fairly innovative, in terms of sending goodie packs to the employees, talking more about sessions around values and behaviors of the company, which you expected, doing some offsites whenever the COVID was going down in the, let's say, in its lifetime, and it's still not over. But I think the larger question is more for the future, what we're going to do, because we are getting indications that people want to continue working remotely. So there needs to be an engagement plan which needs to evolve for keeping this need in place, right? One of the things which we are doing, which is working, is that even if employees are remote or chosen to work in remotely or in a let's say in a hybrid manner, we are ensuring there are some kind of engagement which are there on a monthly or a quarterly basis, which introduce you to the company and what we do, right? And so that, because that always brings a lot of pride and a lot of engagement. We're trying to find legitimate ways and important, let's say skill development ways to bring people back to the organization and connecting, because believe it or not, a lot of learning happens through colleagues. Learning does not happen just from books, right? I mean, that was the same debate many years. It was between correspondence and doing a live course in a university. And both are coexisting, but it's not like one is better than the other. I think the same kind of balance is something which we need to achieve. I would say, we have covered some ground by doing some of the engagements, providing the packs of goodies, and so that people get to introduce to the brands, bring them back to the plants and factories and those visits. But this needs to be still thought through completely for the future, because I don't think we all have a clear model how we're going to operate when 60-70% of the people will always be working remotely, if that happens.
Got it. No, very, very important point. And since you come to the bag of goodies, I can't resist, going to Target and with your stores and setup. How do you see this working out from an employee experience perspective? Especially how do you look at it in the post-COVID world?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly as we move into hybrid, there are moments where it's going to make a lot more sense for our teams to connect in person. Those complex problem solving, collaboration makes a lot more sense in person than some of the remote work. And as we look at transitioning to hybrid in the future and the employee experience, we're taking we're listening a lot more to our team members via team voice. We call it a team voice survey that we do on a weekly basis. So we are surveying folks on a weekly basis, asking how their experience is, what we can do better from that experience perspective. And then kind of really ensuring that as we move into hybrid, there's an opportunity for team members to come into the office where it helps them to work better, solve problems, and an opportunity for them to work remotely. Leaders are looking at the times where, to your point, they need to come into the office and make that connection, and where it just is better for them to work in person because they don't, maybe they don't have the space, maybe they don't want to share that space with their roommates and family, or maybe they actually appreciate the flexibility that they get from working from home and not having to do the commute, being able to be there for lunches and dinners with their family. So as we look to the future and kind of what that experience looks like, we're really learning from our team and what they're saying through the many surveys that we're doing with the team, as well as listening sessions, and keeping an eye on how that continues to evolve as more people come into the office. I think we're seeing, as folks do come in the office, there's a lot of excitement for that experience and people getting back, doing the hallway conversations where you learn from each other, chatting with each other and seeing people that you haven't seen in the last 2.5 years. So trying to balance both the in-person and hybrid and remote based on what our team members are telling us.
Got it. Jackie, if I could direct a little bit of the tough question to you, which is through COVID, we've actually onboarded so many colleagues. And one of the questions literally has been, what is the culture? How do we get them to get a sense of the office? How do we get them to feel the connectedness and belongingness that you actually have as you are in the office? if you play this movie forward and you looked at it saying, I've got a whole bunch of colleagues who've joined remote, who perhaps will spend significant amount of time also in a hybrid world. What's your sense on what works?
Thanks for that, Indy. I think there is something that we've been talking about here, but this connectedness to a higher purpose is really what we're finding works. So not just thinking about what is the work that I'm doing, how am I going to do that, but the why, like why are we here? What connects us as an organization? And when we find that point of connectedness with our purpose, that enables this coming together. So we have been leaning into how do we help bring people together around our purpose. And as a science-based organization who is very focused around our patients, that sense of community is really helping us come together. But that's the same across so many industries, right? We all have our purpose and our impact on the societies in which we live, and looking to that broader reason why we're here really helps translate that connectedness through. We've also had some brilliantly creative moments. I really resonate on what Anne was saying. We find that innovation comes from kind of bumping in to each other and bringing these ideas together. And we found that through the pandemic, we had some brilliantly innovative ways of bringing people together and embracing some of these wider ways that we can connect on a personal level. So strangely, being in each other's environments virtually actually opened up new conversations in some areas as well. So how do we find the best of both? I think is really where a lot of us are at. But for me, it always comes back to our purpose that joins everyone in every company as a connecting thread. And that's a real resonating point.
Yeah, no, love that theme on purpose. So let me just push that a little bit more with all of you. All of you are leaders literally in the sectors that you work in. As for AstraZeneca you have. If I kind of pivot to you, Anil, as you described when we were talking before, medical, medtech, you're on the bleeding edge of it. The question I would have is, how does someone at the GCC connect into the purpose? Is there, do people look at it and say, I'm coming in and creating the next device? Or how do you take individual's purpose, the team purpose, and then connect it back to the company purpose? What's worked for you?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Indy, and we had some great examples of it, which we experienced during the COVID. And like Jackie mentioned, it's eventually all boils down to what is the company purpose and if that resonates very well with the employees or not. For example, we play largely in the medtech space. Now, unfortunately, everybody has to visit hospital for different reasons, right? I mean, because if you're some family member not there, or not well, or friends and so on and so forth. Now, everybody from Philips, whoever ever goes to the hospital and if it has to go for a CT scan, MRI, ultrasound, and they do see the Philips machine, they feel really proud and safe, which was a very essential thing came out in our surveys. And they felt that, because we made it as a company, so they feel that their family members or their loved ones are going to be treated well. And that we realized was a very good linkage to creating the purpose. So you don't need to just create inside the organization. It is the external environment also. The second interesting example happened during the Delta wave in India last year, when there was a huge shortage of oxygen supply, and we are one of the major oxygen concentrator manufacturers. And obviously there was a queue at one point of time for 40,000 concentrators. So we were short by 40,000, and we were trying to get as many as possible throughout the world. But while doing that, we made in every city some oxygen concentrated available for our employees and their families, so that they can loan it when there is a crisis before they go to the hospital. And that created again, a very big sense of belonging. So I think, and this is just as an example, but eventually you need to find much more broader than creating offices and belongingness there, because most of the companies, or the big companies have, if you're able to link to it, like in Philips, we were able to, or we are still continuing to, I think that really, helps in connecting the employees and believing in that purpose. So it does not matter you work in finance, you work in HR, but when you go to the hospital and you see a Philips machine and you feel safe and you feel that your loved ones are going to be treated well, I think that feeling is very different as compared to, you try to create a purpose through a branding event or a marketing event.
Got it. No, I absolutely love the example that you're giving, which is belonging to a bigger purpose and knowing that you're contributing a part in it. And let me pivot that question out to you. If I take Jackie and Anil, the benefit is, of course, that in a sense, if you look at a large number of units in emerging markets, people get a chance to know the company, touch the product. With Target, you've got a company which is a giant in the US, and then you've got employees who are in multiple markets who actually haven't seen what you are in the market. Would love to understand a little bit more about how have you built that, and through COVID, did you do something which was unique to actually make sure that stickiness is there that you built earlier?
Sure, that's a great question. And I love those connections to the purpose of the company. I think what we've really grounded on is our culture and articulating our culture. So care, grow, and win together. You work at Target and you hear that a lot. So we care, grow, and win together. And I think as we've connected that then to the purpose of bringing joy to all families, so team members, it's really tangible. It's like, okay, we care, grow, and win together. That's our culture. And we do that through through career. We do it through pay and benefits. We do it through our commitment to diversity and inclusion, our values of inclusivity, connection, and drive. So kind of bringing all those things together to connect it to the broader purpose. And then through video events, online events, really connecting our team to what we do in our stores, how we bring joy to families every day. I think we do a ton around that, as well as our global supply chain. And we have team members in our global GCC in India connected to all of those businesses and their peers in the US. We're very connected. I think that would be the one benefit through COVID, I would say, is the connection that our team has seen across the globe through things like Zoom. We were working through Skype prior to Zoom, which, you didn't have the same kind of experience seeing your peers across the globe. So I think really connecting through our culture to our purpose and then with our values has been something that has gotten the team really more connected to what we do as an organization through Target.
Got it. So one of themes that's kind of coming out consistently is the connect that you're building, and through COVID, of course, also the degree to which the connect is there. Again, as leaders, would love to hear a little bit about what have you learned personally. Has something changed in your operating model with regard to connect? What do you see your role as? Are you spending more time somewhere versus less? Would love to hear that, perhaps, and if I could lead in with you.
Sure, that's another great question. I think, I work with a team in India and I'm sitting here in the US, so time zone is a challenge. And a couple things that I have learned is Slack is one of my best friends. I can have an ongoing conversation with my team across many time zones, and we can chat pretty easily through Slack. And then making sure just understanding what times actually work for my own team. Like, is your evening good or bad? I think that's something we always try to understand when working in a global context, but not making assumptions about those kinds of things as a leader, making sure I understand, asking the questions, having the conversations. Leader as coach, I think, is really important. I actually got my coaching license while I was executive coaching license while I've been in COVID, which has been excellent for me as a leader as well. I've really leaned in on that to understand my team and their individual needs, desires, aspirations, as well as the team kind of as a unit.
So let me take the piece that you, as you said, the role is changing, you're connecting more. Jackie, if I could direct it to you, one of the things that our research actually tells us that a manager be a coach. Our our studies actually show that the amount of time that managers actually spent on coaching or personal improvement was 15 to 20% of the time. A very significant amount of the time was essentially spent in monitoring. It was spent in reports and meetings. It's about 60% of the role. I think we are seeing two paradigm shifts. One, as Anil is saying, we're seeing the need to connect, the need to be a coach, and almost flip that around, where 60% of the time you're actually being a coach and someone who's connecting the team as well as yourself. Two questions. One is, what have you been doing to enable that? And I think the tougher question, and I'd love to also hear Anil on that, is all of us have grown up a particular way. We've learned to monitor, we've learned to sit in meetings, we've learned to do reports. If you talk about the new role is empathy, how do you teach a manager empathy?
Well, I'm glad that's a straightforward question, Indy. How do you teach empathy? But let me take the slightly easier one first. I think there is, I'm fantastic. And on your coaching qualification, congratulations. We have been actually investing as an organisation in an enterprise-wide coaching specific targeted programme. So leaders as coaches, coaching dynamics, how we train that out across the organisation all the way through, because we've identified that that's a really important paradigm shift, as you said, Indy. I think we have to also acknowledge that as human beings, change takes us time. So how do we continue to work on that? Because it's not like we'll wake up one day and be like, oh, now we're done, and we work in a very different way. And so having that as a collective enterprise conversation has helped. It helps us call each other out on it. It helps us use the right words and terminology to move forward. I think there's a lot of a link on your second question between what have I learned in the pandemic as well, which is the ability to be an authentic leader and be vulnerable is important. It's also important in coaching. So acknowledging that we are all of us learning all of the time, and that actually that is a newer thing to talk about. So you're never done learning, and there is always something through reverse mentoring. You can learn something from all parts of your organization. Teaching empathy, I think, is a pretty tough ask, but what I think is absolutely critical is creating the right environment where people feel they can say, I find this difficult, or can you help me, or so that coaching lands in the right way is really, really important to that. So how, as a culture, can we create an open environment that allows those conversations to breathe and to happen and be received in a positive way is critically important. Now, you can do that through a number of different methods, but culture is a big play, especially working in different countries around the world. So we're also looking at targeting those conversations in different ways in different countries, because we can see that there are different school systems, there are different ways of thinking, there is so many different things that play into this. And honestly, that's one of my favorite bits of my job, and I think that's what's going to continue to make working in these dynamic cross-cultural environments so much fun, but also so much room for innovation, because this is where the brilliance comes from, is when we bring some of these different viewpoints together.
I can see the energy as you talk about it, Jackie. It's contagious. So Anil, I'm going to flip that question a little bit to you. And if you kind of look at yourself as a leader and looked at, the pre-COVID to COVID, and now that we're going to enter hopefully the next phase, what is one thing that has changed for you as a leader? What have you changed, for example, in terms of activity or focus that is dramatically different that you picked up through COVID and actually underlies this entire piece on coaching, connectedness? What would that be?
Sure. So I'll make a couple of comments before that, right? But one is from, what has happened with the COVID is this whole change has been accelerated, right? Maybe we went like 10 years ahead just in 6 months or 12 months, and we're still learning through it, right? So that has happened. And another big thing which has happened is a lot of people call it also a great equalizer in some way, because COVID was one thing which can happen to anyone, right? So everybody was vulnerable equally, right? Does not matter you're rich, poor, healthy, unhealthy, all kind of things were there, right? I mean, so one of the biggest learning came out of me, which I have realized over the last 2.5 years going through it, because we were managing team, running operations, running homes, right? And with this all uncertainty being there, is the empathy and the vulnerability. I think the vulnerability at a workplace has become completely acceptable. Earlier, managers were supposed to be not stone-faced, but tough people who are smiling, always reflecting back, always the nicer people or taking tougher stand. I have seen many people getting emotional, and that is becoming acceptable at the workplace, which is actually connecting people, right? I mean, a lot of us think because it's going virtual is not connecting people, but I think we are connecting a lot more, because it has become acceptable that when you're taking a call, your son or a daughter comes at the background, or your dogs start barking. And nowadays, nobody even asks for an excuse, right? I mean, so I think the integration is happening. There is an empathy there for people who are, multitasking, and there is a more legroom given. And personally, I think I became much more acceptable of my own vulnerability as well as everybody else's around. So I think there is no things which are not acceptable now. Everything is acceptable. Everything is explainable, and you feel a little more free, rather than to be typecast in a particular kind of a manager or a leader. Earlier, we all have gone through leadership, summits and trainings and coachings and everything. And that tells you all about, how the top 10 leaders behave and how you can become a better version of yourself. I think you become much more acceptable as a leader now with the COVID, and I'm loving it.
I love that. So much more vulnerable, much more open. So let me take this piece, which is a theme that's also begun to emerge and played out a little bit. I think what we are hearing is that employee wellness, physical, mental, emotional, these are themes that are becoming central to employers. Our research is basically saying 85% of the employers are basically saying that this is central to the program that they run, and they also see it as central to attracting and retaining talent. But to play a little bit of a devil's advocate, our research in GCCs does still show that only 40% of employees are actually rating themselves as high to very high on mental and physical wellness as we come out of COVID. I would love to understand, what can we do better? We know that these themes are in the middle are on the table. But Jackie, if I start again with you, what are you doing in the organization to bring these topics front and center?
Yeah, no, thank you, Indy. And I think a really important point for our discussion, and certainly the darker side of remote working, as I've personally seen, and we can see from the statistics, we've had many more instances where people have been struggling with mental health, and time away from work has happened more often, unfortunately. I think the positive thing is, exactly as Anil says, that we've accelerated. So actually now we talk about this. It's not something that happens quietly. So I think awareness is critical up front. And then I think it's about the many different layers and it comes back to kind of employee experience. So around layers of awareness, but also around support. So we have a number of different capabilities that we've used technology to help roll out, so that people have support at their fingertips day to day, embedded in some of our communication tools. We've also looked at our packages from a compensation perspective. How do we balance those out, and acknowledging that people are looking for more wellness activities through that? How can we help ensure that people have got the ability to access from physical wellness, bicycles, gyms, if those are appropriate in those countries? But I think there's also an important point about how we're using technology in our processes and our work life, because a lot of these stresses come from extended hours. Exactly as Anne was saying, if we're empathetic leaders and understand when is a good time to connect with people, that's a really important part of well-being, because if people are too highly stressed, very long hours, processes that are repetitive and never seem to get any better, all of these things add layers of stress. So I think it's a combination around how we engage with our employees, but a conversation around coaching, empathy, vulnerability for me is critical to unearthing a lot of these challenges and then moving forward with them.
Absolutely. And if I come to you and again ask the question, but with a slight pivot, how much of what we begin to see of folks begin to bring this topic into office is linked to the how we work, which is the flexibility. Where we work out of. Our research basically says that only 7% of employees actually want full-time back to office. We're also seeing more than 50% of folks actually say they want to be have in a place which is 30 minutes or less traveling to work, and look for a significant amount of flexibility with regard to shift, days, etc. How are you thinking about that at Target?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm just gonna, comment a bit on what Jackie said about the mental health of our team members, and just appreciation that it's actually a conversation that's happening in the workplace now. It used to be something that team members were a little nervous about talking about with leaders. I think that has come to the forefront, and there are more leaders that are open to those conversations. They're seeking guidance from their own leaders or HR about how to have those conversations. And then organizations are providing the support for team members, whether that's technology kind of counseling that's out there, or in some cases, we're bringing people on site to share their expertise with team members. So I think just the vulnerability that the team can have in this environment that they didn't have 2.5 years ago, and the ability for us to address those things through programs and practices that we have in our organizations is critically important to the future employee. They really want to make sure that their company is taking care of them. So I would say for sure that is a foundational thing for Target as we move forward into a hybrid. When you talk about like the folks that want to come to work every day, be in office 5 days a week, I mean, that percentage of folks is really small. I think probably most of us on this call would say, I don't know that I want to drive into the office every day anymore. It really is nice to have a little bit of that flexibility. And the majority of us want some sort of combination of being in the office and being at home. Again, I think just going back on the comments that I said earlier, we're really trying to ensure that we're listening to our team, we're open to being flexible, and we're going to have to iterate at some point. I think what employees are feeling today is going to be different to what they're feeling in 6 months from now, as they break the inertia that they might have of working from home and feeling like that is, maybe there's some comfort. Maybe people are feeling some social anxiety about getting back to work. So providing some of those mental health resources for our team is really important. I think being really flexible, learning from our mistakes, having leaders talk about what's working and not working, and then being open to the like, hey, I may want to come in for a couple hours for a meeting, but I'm actually going to go home and work the rest of my day to get my things that can be done over Zoom or email done is really important to us at Target, to have that kind of flexibility.
Got it.
So, long answer there. Sorry, I kind of got a little long there.
No, absolutely. But I think the theme of flexibility certainly is coming out in a very big way. Customization for the needs of people, I think, is coming in a very big way. But I know that we are almost at time for a fascinating discussion. So I'd like to actually do a quick round of each of you. If I were to ask you to sum up in one sentence for you, how you look at the key theme, what resonates for the talent of the future, what would that be? If you thought of the workforce of the future, what's one theme that's for you the biggest thing on the plate? Anil, you look like you have a ready answer.
I will try to. To be honest, I don't think there's one theme. There is a multiple things which are going on, but I think the career in these kind of a remote working or the hybrid working, and how they can really remain engaged with the company and grow inside an organization, that for me would be one of the biggest things which we need to solve for, because of all the flexibility, all the remoteness, what this this whole pandemic has taught us. I think we are on the right track, but there is a lot more to learn about how people can build career in this kind of an environment. So that is something I would call it's one thing which we're trying to solve for, or one of the learnings.
Got it. And
I think, personalization, to your point, Anil, that it's not like one size fits all. So employees are looking for what matters most to them in personalization. Maybe it is flexibility, maybe it's career and how they can have a career path in an organization. It's the experience they get from the company that they're working for. So I think it really is about listening to our team and employees in the same way that we're listening to our customers and the people who buy our products. So for me, I think really the employee of the future wants some personalization for their career.
Wonderful. Jackie?
I would say to all our leaders, lead with purpose, find your personal connection with purpose, lead with authenticity, think big. We know that the jobs of tomorrow are going to look different from the jobs of today. Seize that opportunity, learn eternally, and change the world. It's a small mission. We can get it done by Christmas. It's fine, but I think really the power that we have in our teams is phenomenal.
It's been wonderful. 30 minutes has just flown by. I think if I were to just pick 3 words that kind of sum this up, one is this whole piece on listening. COVID's basically taught us to be open, be much more vulnerable, open, bring our emotions to the table, very different from the old world. That's one thing that's kind of changed. I think the second is this whole piece around growth in the new world, with the new skills, both the what and the how will change, and being able to do that is going to be the exciting part of it. But eventually, it still comes down to purpose. What brings us here every single day? That has endured through COVID in many, many ways. Perhaps it has strengthened the connected, and finding that will be the key thing that actually drives experience as well as long-term growth for the organization and individuals. But this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us, Anil and Jackie. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Cindy. Yep.
Thank you, Indy, and thanks to our speakers, Jackie, Anil, and Anne, for that absolutely brilliant session.